The Gaelic Football Preview on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more.
All right, we've got a cracking weekend ahead in the Football Championship with quarterfinals in all 4 provinces to look ahead to as many of them as we possibly can. I'm joined on the line by Anthony Moyles and Conleith Gilligan. Evening, guys.
Good evening, Nathan.
Hey Nathan, how you doing?
I think there's no doubt that Tyrone Derry is the biggest game of the weekend, and we'll get onto that in a minute, Conleith, and we should really be starting with the All-Ireland champions, but I do want to talk about Dublin, who get their campaign underway against Wexford at Wexford Park on Saturday at 6:30. Anthony, while everybody has been panicking during the spring about Dublin and their downfall and their demise and their relegation from Division 1, you've been pretty consistent anytime I've heard you on OTB AM with Ger and Owen that now is not the time to panic, that actually come the summer, come the return of Conor Callaghan, of all of their key players, that everything will be just fine. What would you expect to see this Saturday against Wexford to suggest that everything will be just fine for Dublin?
Well, I think Nathan, look, I think that they've been building and I think it's fairly obvious all the different issues that they've had, and you just alluded to it there, bringing players back, finding a bit of form, getting their confidence back. It's been a big issue for them. But, with O'Callaghan coming back, with the settling of Mickey Harte as captain, which I think is a great appointment for him and for the team, I think they're going to go into this game with a very no-nonsense approach. And I think they're going to go in like kind of looking for blood and to set some markers down. If you look at the first half of their league relative to their second half of the league, albeit I think they falter slightly at the end, I think they'll be still saying, listen, we've blooded a few new players, we've blooded a couple, maybe 1 or 2 championship debuts, which I would expect, but we have found out that some players can play in certain areas, some players can't. And they've probably settled a bit more. I think defensively they were a bit all over the place. But as the league went on, they got to a point where they started to tighten up. They got a little bit meaner. They knew what they were at as regards attacking from the defence. And this whole idea of trying to transition the ball and kick long, they found out who can do that and who can't do that. Like at the end of the day, over the last couple of league games, when they started to bring those main players back, you could see the team strengthen. And 3 or 4 or 5 players of the calibre that they have added into the rest is going to make a massive difference. So, if I was Wexford, I think it's an amazing, no one, I think a lot of people would have probably thought Offaly would have come out of that particular tie. So I think Shane Roach has done a remarkable job, and I love the way they're talking about that they're blooding new players and that they'll be mad for the game in Wexford Park, which they will be. But, at the end of the day, I can only see one winner because Dublin will look to come out hard, fast, and be pretty ruthless, I would imagine.
Conleith, Dublin have been so dominant in Leinster. They're going for a 12th Leinster title in a row. They've won 16 of the past 17. Wexford are a Division 4 side. There's very little to suggest that this will be the day that the run will end, but it may be the day that the likes of Kildare and Meath can look to as a real sense that the gap can be closed, and maybe later on in the Leinster Championship that Dublin will be there for the taking. When you listen to Anthony talk about improvements that were made throughout the league campaign, the one thing that stood out was that there was a sense that when James McCarthy came back, things would improve dramatically. And then McCarthy didn't seem himself when he came back. Brian Fenton, Kieran Kilkenny, that real spine of the team all seemed to be struggling for form during that league campaign. Would you have a similar confidence to Anthony that now that we've got to the summer, that all those returning players with Conor Callaghan expected to be back in the squad, that it will somehow just all click?
I think that remains to be seen. I've seen them up against Tyrone, and that was what I thought was going to be the turning point, that they were slightly more impressive, even though Tyrone probably hadn't hit their full gears at that stage. But you cannot impress how much Conor Callaghan means to that team. They lacked a focal point through the league. They tried to kick a bit of ball. They were exposed at not being good enough at it. They tried to go man-to-man at the back, and Armagh at the very start of the league exposed them, and it showed. They were struggling in the full back line, they had no answers, and while they have improved defensively as the league went on, I think it remains to be seen. It's the first time in a decade that the Leinster Championship is probably exciting in any regard again. And it's not that Dublin have fallen off a cliff, but it's just that there's teams a wee bit closer. Kildare showed that there's a wee bit more coming. And I suppose then you have the likes of Louth that have made massive strides forward in the league under Mickey Harte and Gavin Devlin. So I think it's the first time that the Leinster Championship looks in any way exciting. Does anybody break into that and be good enough to beat Dublin? I just can't see where it can go. Wexford, and Anthony was right, Stephen Roach has done an amazing job at Wexford, but it's just the gulf of divisions is too big. And while Dublin haven't been brilliant away from home, it's probably a chance for them to get out of Croke Park, build a bit of momentum. But when the business end comes, it's in Croke Park, they've Con O'Callaghan back. If Brian Fenton, Kieran Kilkenny, McCarthy is captain now, can lead down the middle, I still think they have enough to get out of Leinster comfortably. Albeit whether Kildare will put something up later on in this championship, I don't know. But I just think if them players can have big championships in Leinster, I think they have a really good chance, and it'll still take a very good team to beat them when they get out into an All-Ireland quarter-final. And
even though, Conleith, it is Wexford and all the expectations are that Dublin will win this game and they beat Wexford by 8 points in last year's championship, will we be able to learn a lot from this game about where McCarthy, Fenton, Kilkenny are confidence-wise, that if they go out and lay down a marker and win this by double figures, well, then we can believe that actually Dublin were working towards something during the league. But if this turns out to be something of a struggle and it's tight at half-time, that all the bit of confidence that was eroded during the league campaign, like, that's all going to come to the forefront of everybody's mind again.
Yeah, look, I don't think anything's going to be proven this weekend. If they win by double figures, they're playing Wexford. If they struggle, well, then they're maybe off it. Like, I think all Dublin really need to do this weekend is get out of it and build again. It's a lose-lose situation for them. But the one thing that I suppose we're all looking for from the outside is, the one thing that Dublin were known for was their use of the ball in the final quarter. They didn't give it away. Kilkenny conducted the orchestra. They eventually got it to the shooters inside the scoring zone, and they were so efficient, 70, 75, 80% efficiency all the time. Through the league, it was just so on Dublin, like, it was pot shots from silly angles, stuff that most teams do as a matter of course, but Dublin didn't. They were just so robotic in how they went about their play. So the one thing that I suppose I would be looking for, and I suppose that opposition managers will be looking for, is, are they shot happy? Will they try and take shots from silly angles, or have they got back into the type of game plan that Jim Gavin had enforced, where you got it into the right man in the right position, and if it took 20 or 25 passes and 4 or 5 or 6 different phases to do that, then great. But if they keep continuing along the league, I think they will give teams a chance, especially with better defences and better forward lines to come up against, because Kildare and those teams have showed that defensively they have got better and they have got really good forwards, so they will trouble them later on down the line. And if you can't shut down Wexford in the first round of a Leinster Championship, you're going to struggle to shut down some of the better teams in Leinster come the latter stages.
Meath against Wicklow, Park Talchin on Sunday at 2 o'clock. I'm not sure how many in Meath were expecting it to be Wicklow to come through that clash against Laois, but now that it is, that was a big score that Wicklow racked up, Anthony, last weekend in that victory against Laois. Is there a little bit of concern in Meath about the scoring power of this Wicklow side now?
Well, I wouldn't say concern necessarily, Nathan, because I'd say they're probably worried more so about themselves and where exactly they are. They had a quite a different campaign during the league, in the sense of bad start. We're facing down the barrel of relegation, and managed to kind of pull it out of the fire, I suppose, with a number of decent performances over the last few games. They played Derry, and kind of ran them really well. A team that probably, could have and should have got out of Division 2, and a team that probably were playing fairly well all consistently throughout the league. So I think Andy is in a position, kind of a la Dublin. Obviously the names that will come back aren't as, the names who obviously have multiple All-Irelands, but There's still big names within a Meath context. Conor McGill, Brian Menton, Ronan Jones, and there's your two midfields, the midfielders, your full back, your centre half forward. So fellas like this who are vital again for Meath, coming back from injury and bolstering a squad, and indeed adding that solidity and strength all the way through the spine of the team. That's vital for them. So I think again, they will be relatively happy with how the league finished. And it's amazing how a small result, like they got out of jail against Offaly, and all of a sudden the campaign took off. And where if they didn't get that last minute goal against Offaly, it could have been a really different campaign. And then you'd be going into this fixture against a team full of confidence, who are after taking the scalp of Laois and scoring 5-14 or whatever. I think we're only getting 2 or 3 wides, who are mad for action. And it would be very, very tricky. But I think Andy can build on the confidence from that. They've obviously had a bit of a break. They've had plenty of league football in Meath, and they've brought a number of new guys into the panel. The under-20s didn't go so great against Dublin last week. So that's although there was a lot of kind of lads who will play again next year, it's still not a massive confidence builder for the younger lads. But I still think that they have enough to take away, and especially in Navan. That's a big help for them, of course, being in Navan, because they know obviously the confines and the boundaries and everything else around Navan very, very well. They certainly won't take Wicklow for granted. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and neither should they. But I would expect that Andy will be concentrating on a performance, concentrating on themselves, and with those players that have come back to strengthen the squad, I think Meath should have enough to see them off.
Conleith, if Dublin aren't at it, a lot of people feel Kildare are maybe best placed to take advantage, but they've got a really tricky game this Sunday at Newbridge against Louth. Louth scored 5-10 against Carlow. Obviously managed by Mickey Harte with all that experience, back-to-back promotions. With Sam Mulroy in studio a few weeks back, and very inspirational figure as well. Has been such an extremely talented footballer. Scored 2-5 against Carlow last weekend. This could be one of the games of the weekend if Louth can keep that momentum going.
Yeah, look, I think what Mickey Harte and Gavin Devlin have done, I don't really think anybody expected it just to happen as quick and to be as good as it has been. Obviously in Sam Mulroy, the first time I seen him was a few years ago in a league game versus Down, and it was a dead rubber. The last league game, Down had already got their safety and had played a second string team, and Mulroy kicked the lights out. I think he got 8 points that day, and he was exceptional. And that's the first time I've seen him, and he has kept that trajectory going, and he does look like the real deal. Obviously, as in the division he was in, he was better than anything else there. Now it steps up again. He's up against a different calibre of player. But look, if there's going to be a shock, this could be it. Kildare will probably go into it a wee bit complacent because they had a good league. They stuttered in patches. But I think the job that Mickey Harte has done there has been incredible. I was up at their Centre of Excellence about 7-8 weeks ago at a coaching day, and I couldn't believe, they took me in around the changing rooms, and it had been completely transformed. They'd knocked down walls. They had up-to-date facilities, ice baths, indoor 4G areas for warming up. So Mickey has took it to a new level in Louth, and I think the players have reacted to that. And I heard Samuel around the podcast, and basically you can just tell that everything that's going on there is very much Tyrone-esque, is that they're getting everything they need to be the best they can be, and they're taking all the obstacles out of their way. So look, you would still expect Kildare to come through, but Louth will give them a tricky game, because the one thing Gavin Devlin has done and has been known to do in Ulster is that he tactically sets up his teams really well for the opposition. And in the likes of Daniel Flynn, they need to be defensively very, very good, not man to man, but as a unit, because Kildare have too many forwards that were shooting the light out in Division 1 for them not to be needing to be handled really, really well.
Anthony, the obvious thing is to constantly name check Mickey Harte when it comes to Louth, but one of the things that Samuel Roy was pointing out was the brilliance of Gavin Devlin. Said the best coach he's ever worked with, and like, these two sides are both going to be Division 2 sides next year. Is it still Kildare, all that experience of playing Division 1 and almost managing to stay in the division, that still puts them at a very different level to where Louth are?
I 100% agree with Conleith in the sense of, there's all of those various factors, but the other factor for Kildare, of course, they were within a kick of a ball of staying in Division 1, and they were building massive momentum. And I think Glenn and Dermot and you know, Johnny Doyle and Anthony Rainbow have they also, on the flip side of the coin, have started to engineer and foster a really good environment around Kildare football, which I think was missing for the last number of years. So they're all Kildare men, they're all stalwarts of being there, and they all have Kildare football at the core of their belief and the ability to improve themselves. It was interesting. I was reading an article by Johnny, and he's just saying, you know, we need to get our house in order, and that's the way he would have looked at it over the last number of years. They've done massive work underage, those fellas, so they're not just being parachuted into the senior team and saying, listen, best of luck, see how you get on. These lads have been doing it at underage, bringing players through, doing it at all different ages, doing it with the clubs involved. So they're lily white, absolutely 100%, and they will have that team ready, I would feel, and ready for anything. I can't see them, you know, being any way complacent, because they will be aware of the ability of Louth. I think Louth are as Conleith says, you know, people talk about Leinster football. I think a number of teams are on that upward trajectory. They're all chasing Dublin, of course, but like, if you remove that out, they are playing better football. They're much better organised. Leinster football, and Jesus Conleith would know this, we marked each other enough and played against each other. Like, for years we played very much a brand of, there wasn't really a defensive system. It was man on man, and you just went at it. And it still took a lot of time for teams such as Meath and Kildare, who traditionally were stuck in that vein to adapt. And even Louth, and you could see it even in the league campaign against Louth. I think they shipped 4 or 5 goals in one of the first few games. They were getting well bet by Limerick, and they managed to come back. But all of a sudden, the imprint of Devlin, of Mickey Harte, but especially Devlin, with setting them up, making sure that they're solid, making sure that they're not allowing things come down through the middle, making sure that as a unit they're able to communicate. And I can imagine he's going to say to themselves, right lads, we're going to frustrate the daylights out of this Kildare forward line. And what we're going to do is, unlike Monaghan against Kildare in the league, if you remember, we're not going to just allow them have the freedom of the park here and kick scores. We're going to frustrate them, we're going to tackle hard, and we're going to put the question marks over the Kildare forward line, which still lingers slightly, that can they spread the scores out? You know, if you remove Flynn, where else are they going to get the score? So I would imagine that's going to be Louth's major MO for the weekend, and then look for, say, right, can we snag another bit on the far end ourselves, and can we keep ourselves very tight to Kildare as much as we can in this game? Maybe then the pressure builds a little bit on Kildare, and who knows. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be a very tricky fixture, and could be a absolutely cracking game. But I still think Kildare should have enough to get past them.
Before the Midlands Mafia get very angry, Anthony, a quick mention as well of Westmeath, Longford, 2 Division 3 sides. I think Longford had a bit too much for Westmeath during the league campaign. It's Saturday evening at Cusack Park. It doesn't look on paper like there's very much to separate the two of them.
Not at all. Not at all. It's going to be, like, really, honestly, Nathan, you lined me up for that one.
Go on, call it.
It's impossible to call it, to be honest with you. Both teams kind of looked like they were having good campaigns, then not so good. You know, it's put in some unbelievably very strong performances throughout the league, and then followed it up with kind of weaker performances. So it is really a throw up, and honestly, I wouldn't be able to call it at this stage. You know, it's that difficult. You know, both teams play a similar type of brand of football. So again, I don't know. That's anyone's guess, to be honest.
So Tyrone back in action this weekend, taking on Derry, Conleith. Conor McKenna has been cleared to play in that game for Tyrone. They got the job done against Fermanagh first day out, and so much of the talk over the last few weeks has been about the 7 players who have left the squad. But in terms of that first 15, maybe that first 18 for Tyrone, they haven't really lost anything, and it does feel as though maybe it suits Tyrone and their management team that we're all obsessed with what's gone and not focusing so much on what's remaining.
Yeah, I think that was right. And again, I would be in total agreement. Whenever you've seen the likes of Paul Donaghy, Mark Bradley, Lee Brennan, Tiernan McCann, Hugh Pat McGeary leaving, I felt that there would be a deficit of training, and that when you take that sort of quality of 6 or 7 players out of a panel, the AVB games, the quality of the drills that you would be running might drop. But look, it hasn't proved to be the case. Tyrone finished the league strong, and while I didn't think Fermanagh would beat them, they done what I expected them to do. This frustrated them for a long time, but it was Conor Meyler who nearly single-handedly whenever they were struggling in the first half and it didn't really look like they fancied it, he carried the fight to it and he got the goal, and that just set them on the path. But look, Conor McKenna getting off is massive for Tyrone. It causes Derry a few more problems. I just felt that if he would have been missing that game, Derry would have had the right sort of players in the right areas to mark Tyrone's, because, you know, I would fancy Christy McKay to give Cathal McShane a game of it. You know, Gareth McKinless is back there, could tag Dara Canavan. You know, Gareth McKinless could also go at wing half forward on Myler. You know, Derry have the 2 or 3 defenders that could take out Tyrone's 2 or 3 key players. But the loss of Kieran McFall is massive. If Kieran McFall had been in that half forward line, for example, he could have done a job on Myler. That would have meant that Gareth McKinless could have done a job on maybe Darren McCurry. So I think that one, Derry don't have the pieces in the chessboard to move around now the way they would have had if Kieran McFall had been there. So that Tyrone getting back their man and Derry then lost McFall is a massive shift, and that probably throws it a wee bit in Tyrone's favour again. The fact it's also an Oma. Tyrone's late league form really improved. Derry's late league form sort of disappeared. And there's so many wee things. Tyrone were averaging 21 points a game through the league in Division 1. Derry were averaging 16 in Division 2. So when you look at it like that, the advantages are all with Tyrone, but Derry do stand a really good chance, because the one thing, a bit like Gavin Devlin and Louth, that Rory Gallagher has proven in Ulster time and time again, is that his ability to set up a team, and even an unfancied team, to frustrate the opposition and to win games has been massive. And the one thing Derry would have been doing from the outset is looking at this game, 3 or 4 league games to go, they still would have had an eye on Tyrone. And I think they'll have worked to perfection on the type of game they want to play. I don't expect it to be as open as a lot of the games have been in the last number of weeks, because Derry can't afford it to turn this into a shootout, because they just don't have enough firepower up front in comparison to Tyrone. But if Derry could get to 16 points, they stand a real good chance in an Ulster Championship dogfight.
I'm thinking, Anthony, of the criticism that Frank Lampard was getting for the way Everton set up in the Merseyside derby last week and trying to make it a bit of a scrap and a really messy game. But then you think, well, what else could he do? Because they just don't have the same quality of players. And like for Rory Gallagher, he's got to approach Tyrone as the All-Ireland champions, that the best thing Derry can do here is make it a little bit scrappy, can make it a bit of a mess of a game, a bit stop-start, to keep it as tight as possible. Not particularly pretty. Wouldn't be at all surprised at the end of this. There's a lot of criticism coming in for Ulster football and the style of play, but that's probably exactly what Derry need from this game.
Yeah, I would have probably agreed with you wholeheartedly, Nathan, you know, a number of years ago, because you know, I think Derry were in a position whereby they would have had to do that absolutely. As you know, if you're a management team, you'd say, listen, this is where we're going with this first and foremost, and that's just it. And if it doesn't work, we're going to chomp down on it, we're going to do it again and again. But Derry are a different animal these days. You know, Derry have got firepower. And you know, Conleith isn't going to big them up because, you know, he can't, so I can. And you know, they have the ability to score, and they have the ability to get at you. So I completely agree that it would be foolhardy of Gallagher to say, well, listen, we're just going to go at it here and we're going to see how we get on. He has to have a plan. The plan will be to take out certain players of that Tyrone team who are, you know, their main focus and their ability to kick balls over the bar and to get scores is prevalent with them. Tyrone, they do have a spread of scores, but certainly, as you can see throughout the league, as the form started to turn for them, there was 1 or 2 or 3 players, including Myler, who we just spoken about, Harte especially, when he started to drift up to that centre forward position. If you remember against, I think it was Kerry, and even Dublin, his ability to break lines, his ability to get on the end of things, his ability to set scores up. You know, McShane hasn't been shooting the lights out. I think he's probably had a bit of a frustrating campaign for him himself. And, you know, they've had to rely on the likes of Donnelly coming in to try to change things, Richie, that is, and even Matty to a certain degree. But I'd say Tyrone are scratching their head. I think they would absolutely be happy with how the league finished. But there was a spell during that league where you were kind of saying, geez, they're a little bit rudderless here, you know. And they were also doing things at the back, which I haven't seen them do in a long time, which is allowing that central column to be open. And you know, they're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit with Harte moving out of certain areas. But it's Derry, I think, have the ability, Nathan, to kick scores, and I think they massively have the ability to counter-attack. They've great pace coming, they've powerful midfield, they've got class up front that can kick scores, find goals. So I think they will frustrate. I think they'll keep it tight. I think they will go man on certain players. But I think they will look to counter-attack and then kind of reset and go again. And, you know, if anyone can do it, as Conleith just mentioned, like Gallagher is massively adept at laying out a plan that he thinks is best for his team. And I wouldn't worry too much about Derry in the last few games in the league. I think probably going into Division 1 for Derry next year might have been a step a little bit too early for them. I think another year in Division 2 and win it well next year type thing, and then go into Division 1 when all those players have had enough, because they're coming the last number of years, and I think there's a big performance in them, and this just might be the one for them.
I don't know what Derry Yera-ism is, but Anthony's just crushed it there, Conleith. He is giving you the big one. In terms of the rivalry between Derry and Tyrone, just how great is the Derry dislike for Tyrone?
Yeah, look, I've been Ballinderry, and we would be divided right down the middle in terms of the river separating Tyrone and Derry, so that has always been contentious here. And to be fair, in and around 95, from 93 into 96, 97, it was fierce. It was incredibly, nearly toxic to a degree.
Right.
And then whenever Derry went off the wane and Tyrone came forward, it kind of decimated because we didn't just have enough to shout about, and the odd token win just wasn't enough. So, look, I think this could ignite it all again. There'll be no love lost between Derry and Tyrone, that's for sure. But again, Derry haven't been as close in recent times. Now, the last day out in Omagh, Shane McGuigan kicked 1-6, and Derry came 10-12 minutes from a very, very famous victory in Omagh. So just I was looking at the teams today. Tyrone have 12 of that team still available to them. Derry have only 7. So the one thing that Rory Gallagher's done to his credit is stop that huge turnover of players. And I think that's been massive. And in the likes of Niall Loughlin, he has improved. Like, he was one of the best players that played the Sigerson last year. And the one thing is, as Anthony touched on, Derry have serious pace and power. And round the middle, they will have enough for Con Kilpatrick and Kennedy. And it's whether, if they go with a Paddy Cassidy in round the middle, you know, he's a midfielder, but he's played wing half back, wing half forward, serious running capacity. But I think the loss of Kieran McFall will be big, because he'll always kick you 1 or 2 points. And it's just, where are they going to get the scores? If, for example, Ciara O'Kane did a great piece in Irish News today, and it showed that Tyrone full back line has been the meanest over the last 14 games anywhere in Ireland. Paddy Hampshire concedes on average a point a game. Shane McGuigan will be picked up by Paddy Hampshire. So Shane McGuigan has to do to Paddy Hampshire what no forward has done in the last 14 games, which is a big ask. But the one thing that Shane McGuigan is, he's a supremely confident footballer. And if anybody can do it, it is him. And Derry will need him to lead the line. They will need him to score 8 points, whether it be from play or frees. They'll not care. If he can score 8 or 9 points, then I can see Derry getting up there, because in Emmett Bradley, they have another long-rangey player. Niall Loughlin has got a great eye for goal. And in the likes of Ethan Doherty, Gareth McKinless, Glass, Paddy McGrogan, they've got a lot of pace and drive. But it's a big ask to go to the home of the All-Ireland champions, who, if Derry had been playing them instead of Fermanagh in the preliminary round, I think this would have been a more dangerous game for Tyrone. But they've had that Fermanagh game out of their system now. They'll have seen a lot of Derry as well. They'll know where the pitfalls are. So, look, while the Tyrone Fermanagh game was a damn squib, Donegal Armagh excited a wee bit. Like, I think this could be the game, and it might not be. Do you think,
Conleith, do you think the belief is there in the Derry players that they can beat Tyrone? Because you talk about the mid-90s when they're sharing Ulster titles, and at that stage Derry had the All-Ireland in the back pocket and Tyrone were still waiting. But for a quarter of a century nearly now, it hasn't really been a rivalry. It's been all Tyrone success.
Yeah, outside of that famous win in 06, it's been all one-way traffic. But this Derry team is backboned by players that have been successful at minor and under-20 level, and that inferiority complex is gone. And then you've got Chrissy McCaig, Brenton Rodgers, Shane McGuigan, who played with Slaughtneil and beat everybody before them. So there's players here that are used to being at the very top end. Like Gareth McKinless regularly stars in the Sigerson, as did Niall Loughlin. Conor Glass has come home from Australia, has been a big plus for them. So it's a different type of Derry player now. Do they fully believe? It's hard to tell. Unless you're in and around that setup, you don't know. But they've made enough moves in the league to say that they're going to be formidable. but there is still a gulf between Division 1 and Division 2, and it'll be whether they can bridge that and score the points they need to keep them on, because that is going to be the thing. The defensive game has kind of disappeared a lot. Teams are attacking a wee bit more now, and then the big thing, like last week, is coming down to kickouts. Oran Lynch is good on the kickouts. Niall Morgan is the best in the country at the moment by a distance for me, and Tyrone will probably try and get at Derry's kickouts with Niall Morgan coming up into the half-forward position. And I'm not as sure, even though Oran Lynch comes out and plays a bit of football as well, I don't know if Derry will do the same to Tyrone. So for me, the kickouts could be a massive battle. And if you look at what Donegal done on Armagh, it gave them the platform to win the game. So it's something that Derry could go after Tyrone. They probably wouldn't be expecting it. So it would be one of those things that maybe a bit of a game changer.
And just on the other quarter-final in Ulster, Conleith, Monaghan against Down. Down seem to be in complete disarray at the moment. Is this as straightforward a clash as you can have in Ulster, that this should be a relatively... it should be a Monaghan victory? Anything else would be quite a shock?
Yeah, look, on paper, it should be a very straightforward, comprehensive victory for Monaghan at home. But it's the Ulster Championship, and it's still the one championship that throws up outliers all the time. Down, as you say, look, haven't been going well. They were late getting a manager. James and Aidan O'Rourke came in, and they stuttered through the league. I was at the Offaly game. They were good enough to win that game. They were 3 points up with time up, and Offaly staged a great comeback and got the point victory, and that kind of was the nail in the coffin for the league. But the one thing Down have, is to have Darren O'Hagan, the Barry O'Hagan. They have players of real calibre, and on their day, while they're missing Liam Kerr, Keelan Doherty, Finn McElroy's travelling to America, they have had a lot of blows. But I expect this to be a bit like Tyrone for Monaghan. Down will give a really good account of themselves early on, and they'll stay in the game for a while. But the strength of Monaghan, what they have on the bench, what they have coming off, the form of Jack McCarran, it'll just be too much, and it'll get them over the line. But I think it'll be very hard for Monaghan not to have been complacent over the last 4 weeks with everything that was going on in Down. So I think Monaghan will win, but I think Down will probably do better than people are giving them any chance with.
Gaelic Football and Off the Ball in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more. There are 3 other provincial quarter-finals this weekend. In Connacht, Sligo play Roscommon in Markievicz Park on Saturday evening, while in Munster it's Clare against Limerick and Waterford against Tipperary. Of those 3, Anthony, which is likely to be the best game? I'm going to say on the presumption, and get your texts in, that Roscommon, Clare and Tipperary win those 3 games. Am I wrong in any of them?
No, I don't think so. Clare have been. It's an amazing. I look at Clare every year, and I think people do, and they kind of say, Jesus, they just consistently keep coming and performing really, really well. I looked at. I think that one of the papers had a pull out of all the teams at the start of the championship, and it had a little bio on every team. And of the managers, most managers is kind of 1, 2, 3 years. Like Colin Collins, I think has been there 6, 7, maybe years. I think there's only one manager. He could even be there 8 years. So there's only 4 managers, I think, who are with counties more than 5 years, and one of which is him. So, he's an amazing man. He's done an unbelievable job with them with a relatively small pick. It would be great to see them get a bit of a run and rattle on a couple of wins. Roscommon are, you talk about the complacency. Roscommon and people are just talking like, who will they meet in the Connacht finals? That's the only thing that I think could potentially catch them.
And Sligo buzzing after the under-20 title.
Yeah, listen, it's probably just a bit early for them, but at the same time, they'll go in there and they'll just say, let's, we can do it at this age. And as Conleith just says, you can have inferiority complexes with a couple of old stagers who've maybe been getting hammered by the same teams, but when that influx of youth comes and they've been battling with the likes of the bigger teams at 14, 16, minor, 20s, then all of a sudden these fellas are coming in, they're saying, sure, I played against this fella loads of times, and should we bet them loads of times? So that inferiority complex goes out the window. And the major thing for the management team is not to, who are over those teams, is to make sure that confidence that comes in and that belief is instilled actually in the older lads, not the other way around. you know, will they give a go to counter themselves? I expect them to do it, but I just think Roscommon have found now an ability to even though they've racked up, they've let in a lot of big scores, they're still scoring at the far end massively. And they've got a very, very serious forward unit. I think if they can tighten up as well a bit more at the back and from midfield back, I think they'll have a decent say in the championship. And I think they will take Sligo, but at the same time, Sligo will give a good account of themselves, no doubt.
Conleith Limerick did get promotion from Division 3, but I don't know if that means you'd disagree with anything Anthony's said there.
Yeah, no, look, you couldn't disagree. I think he's right. I think in terms of Clare, the one thing is that every year you're thinking they can't keep going, but in fairness, the job Collins has done there,
9 seasons,
you know, like, it's incredible, like the fact that the players are responding to him. You know, obviously I don't know much about him, but whatever he's doing works because he keeps reinventing that team and Tuberty, and he's got players at the very top end, you know, that, as I say, for those weaker counties in divisions on down, the one barometer for players is they're playing in Sigerson and in competitions, and those players don't look out of place in those competitions. And the same with Sligo, and you know, the players that are playing week in and week out with Roscommon, with Mayo players, and they're every bit as good. So if you can bring that back, it gives you a fair decent chance. But look, it's hard to see any other winners outside of Roscommon, Clare and Tip in that one.
All right, Conleith Gilligan, Anthony Moyles, thanks as always. Enjoy the weekend.
All right, thanks very much.
If that wasn't enough for you, there's loads more build up to the weekend on episode 14 of the Football Pod with Paddy and James. It's on the OTB GAA feed or the Football Pod feed. Just search for it wherever you get your podcasts, and it's brought to you in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. You can check out #the toughest for more.
The Gaelic Football Preview on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #the toughest for more.